She believed the night would hide her misstep, that the world outside wouldn't know her face, her secret. But he came back early. Under the moonlight, the surface of the pool shivered as she froze mid-stroke. His car's tires crunched along the driveway, barking the silence awake. The gate swung open, and in that moment she understood that everything she risked, the lies, the fear, the longing, had led to this. Before we get into what happened next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. She was hired barely 3 weeks ago, in a grand mansion perched on a hill outside a quiet suburban town. Her name was Claire Donovan. He was Jacob Sterling, a tech titan whose wealth was whispered about. Everyone knew his pools were pristine, his staff invisible, and his life, except for one fragile thread of loneliness, perfect. Claire, a single mother new to town, thought the job would be simple: clean, cook, leave by dusk. But tonight, alone under an impossibly expansive sky, she walked toward the edge of the pool, heart pounding, wanting for something she couldn't name. She slipped out of her shoes, let the hem of her dress brush her ankles, and stepped into the water. It was cold at first, a shock, then soothing, like she could almost dissolve the fatigue, the guilt, the distance from her child back home. She floated, letting the water carry her resentment, her dreams, the shame of a life she believed was too small. But far beyond the polished walls, something shifted. A car engine, a silhouette beyond the hedge. And her breathing caught, her body stilled, because that car was coming up the drive earlier than she'd been told. Who was Claire really? And what was she so desperate to hide? Jacob Sterling was no ordinary man. To the public, he was a billionaire with a legacy carved from steel and software, a recluse who rarely appeared in photographs and even more rarely in public. He built his empire on innovation, yet guarded his personal life with walls as high as the mansion he retreated into. To his neighbors, he was a ghostly figure, his estate silent by day, heavily guarded by night. And when someone like Claire Donovan stepped into his world, questions inevitably followed. Who was she really, this young mother who seemed to appear out of nowhere, carrying little more than a resume and a fragile smile? Why, of all places, did she find herself in his pool, a place forbidden, sacred in its privacy? Was it a mistake made by a woman longing for freedom? Or was she searching for something Jacob never wanted the world to see? And when he caught her, what did Jacob Sterling truly do? Jacob Sterling's story was one of brilliance, wealth, and walls, both the concrete kind and the invisible kind that kept people at a distance. He was a man who seemed to own everything but trust. In the early days of his career, his name was whispered in boardrooms as the visionary who turned failing tech into fortune. He was admired for his ambition, envied for his empire, and feared for the quiet ruthlessness with which he protected both. Those who worked for him knew the rules. No unnecessary questions, no lingering in restricted spaces, and above all, no trespassing on the private corners of his estate. His mansion, perched on the outskirts of town, was a place of beauty wrapped in mystery. Locals who passed by on winding roads described it as both dreamlike and foreboding. To some, he was a genius recluse. To others, a man who had far too much to hide. Claire Donovan, by contrast, was a woman most people would pass by without noticing, except for the quiet determination in her eyes. A single mother, she carried the weight of raising her daughter alone, taking jobs that paid little, stretching every dollar. When she came to the Sterling mansion, she appeared like any other hire, quiet, disciplined, eager to prove herself. But the agency that sent her forward left behind a few unanswered questions. A background check that didn't quite add up, gaps in her work history, inconsistencies in where she had lived. At first glance, she seemed like the perfect maid, hard-working, discreet, almost invisible in the way Sterling liked. Yet beneath her calm exterior was a woman haunted by untold struggles, a woman who carried both desperation and secrets in equal measure. To Jacob, she was just another employee. To anyone watching closely, she was someone who did not fully belong, Even before the night of the pool, there were signs that something inside the Sterling estate was unsettled. Neighbors whispered of strange noises echoing from the mansion long after midnight, doors slamming, voices raised, lights flickering in rooms that should have been empty. Rumors grew when one of the estate's security cameras, the one closest to the pool, suddenly stopped recording just days before Claire's late-night swim. It was dismissed as a technical glitch, but in a house where nothing was left unchecked, the failure seemed almost deliberate. Some said Sterling was testing his staff. Others believed someone wanted the pool hidden from view. Whether accident or intent, it set the stage for what would follow. And yet what happened the night Claire Donovan slipped into the Billionaire's pool would expose far more than anyone bargained for. On the Friday evening in question, Jacob Sterling was said to have left for a weekend trip. His staff was informed he would be gone until Monday, a pattern he often followed to keep his business dealings private. To most of the employees, it meant a rare reprieve from the intensity of working in his household. For Claire Donovan, it was the first time she found herself completely alone in the estate. The house was silent, the long hallways empty, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and chlorine drifting from the pool outside. She had been warned early on that Sterling's rules were strict. No one, under any circumstance, was to touch the water in his private pool. But the temptation grew. Perhaps it was the exhaustion pressing on her shoulders, or the ache of loneliness, or simply the desire to feel weightless in a world that was crushing her. That night, the rules felt distant. The pool called to her. Claire slipped through the glass doors and stood at the water's edge. The pool glowed faintly under the garden lights, reflecting a sky dotted with stars. She hesitated only for a moment before stepping out of her shoes and slipping into the water. The shock of the cold was followed by relief, her body surrendering to the stillness around her. For a moment she laughed, softly, the kind of laughter that escapes only when no one else can hear. She swam slow laps, her mind quiet for the first time in weeks, the water carrying her troubles far from reach. Yet even as she drifted, something about the night felt strange. The silence seemed too complete, the house too watchful. And then, in the distance, the sound came, a low, growing hum of a car engine rolling up the long driveway. Her laughter died instantly. She froze in the center of the pool, her breath caught in her throat as headlights swept across the manicured hedges. In that instant, Claire Donovan's sense of freedom collapsed into dread. She swam quickly to the side, clinging to the edge as the gates opened and Jacob Sterling's car rolled in. But he was not alone. Witness accounts suggest he returned with associates, men whose faces carried the stern calm of business not meant for the public eye. Claire remained hidden in the shadows of the water, praying the darkness would shield her. But the pool was a mirror, and mirrors reveal more than they hide. Did they see her? Did they recognize her? What she was doing there should have been nothing more than trespassing, a maid breaking a house rule. And yet, whispers began almost immediately afterward that her presence was not so innocent, that she wasn't just swimming for pleasure. Some claimed she was searching for something Jacob Sterling wanted buried. Others said she was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Either way, the night had changed everything. In the days that followed, whispers spread beyond the mansion walls. Employees who had once seen Claire Donovan as quiet and obedient now wondered why she had risked everything for a forbidden swim. Why had she been so terrified when Jacob Sterling returned? Why had she not simply admitted to breaking a house rule, taken her dismissal, and walked away? Her silence raised more questions than her actions. Some claimed they saw her trembling, barely able to meet Sterling's eyes. Others insisted she begged for forgiveness. Yet none of them could explain the fear that clung to her in that moment. A fear so profound it seemed to suggest she was hiding something much larger than a stolen swim in a billionaire's pool. The police became involved not long after, and what began as a private embarrassment quickly turned into a full investigation. When authorities ran Claire Donovan's records, inconsistencies emerged. Her background was not as solid as she had claimed. Dates of employment didn't align, addresses were mismatched, and even her references seemed unreliable. The image of the hard-working single mother began to blur with shadows of a past no one could fully trace. At the same time, mansion staff came forward with troubling accounts. Some admitted they had caught Claire wandering into areas she had no reason to be in: Sterling's private office, locked storage rooms, even the restricted wing of the house that no staff member was ever permitted to enter. What had she been looking for? The question lingered, unanswered, but it made one thing clear. Claire Donovan had not come to the Sterling mansion only to clean. The media pounced on the story almost instantly. Tabloids splashed it across their front pages. Maid caught in billionaire's pool. Scandal or secret? Cable news turned it into nightly commentary, questioning whether Jacob Sterling was hiding something that Claire had stumbled upon. Talk show hosts debated her intentions, painting her as either a desperate mother who made a foolish mistake or a calculating woman with motives far deeper than she let on. The frenzy only grew when rumors surfaced that certain pieces of Sterling's estate security footage had gone missing. Some believed it was an attempt to protect his reputation. Others insisted it was proof that Claire Donovan had uncovered something powerful enough to be worth erasing. And yet, the truth was far more complicated. Because when investigators looked deeper, what they found would change everything about both the maid and the billionaire himself. The investigation turned sharply when detectives uncovered documents that revealed Claire Donovan was not the woman she had presented herself to be. The inconsistencies in her background were not simple mistakes. They were deliberate omissions. Years earlier, her family had been caught in the collapse of a mid-sized company, a collapse triggered by a ruthless acquisition orchestrated by none other than Jacob Sterling. He walked away richer, his empire expanded, while the Donovan family was left in ruins, stripped of security and forced into years of financial hardship. For Claire, what began as quiet resentment grew into a desperate mission. Her employment at Sterling's estate was never about cleaning floors or polishing silver. It was about access. She had waited for her chance to step into the spaces Sterling kept locked, convinced that proof of his hidden dealings was somewhere within those walls. Her late-night swim was not a lapse in judgment born of recklessness. Investigators came to believe it was part of her plan, a way to mask her true movements within the mansion. Witnesses recalled seeing her near Sterling's office earlier that week, her hands trembling as though she had almost been caught. In court, prosecutors presented evidence suggesting she had been searching for documents that could link Sterling to financial crimes, hidden accounts, records of bribes, fraudulent contracts buried within his private files. Sterling, seated at the defense table, denied everything with a steady calm, insisting that Claire Donovan was nothing more than a disgruntled employee, fabricating stories to cover her misconduct. But when Claire finally spoke, her testimony shook the courtroom. She told the story of her family's downfall, of nights spent watching her parents lose everything while Sterling gained more. Her voice was steady, her words precise, and her accusations made headlines around the world. In the end, the case that had captured headlines and riveted the public unraveled in ways no one could have predicted. Just as momentum seemed to swing in Claire Donovan's favor, just as her testimony was beginning to expose cracks in Jacob Sterling's carefully curated empire, the charges against him were quietly dismissed. The courtroom emptied in confusion, reporters scrambled for answers, and officials refused to provide a clear explanation. Jacob Sterling walked free, his polished smile returning as though the weeks of accusations had been nothing more than an inconvenience. His attorneys called it justice served, but whispers in back corridors suggested pressure, influence, and money had tilted the scales. Claire Donovan, however, did not stay to fight. Within days, she vanished, last seen boarding a late-night flight under an assumed name. To this day, no one knows where she went, or whether she ever found the proof she claimed to possess. Her disappearance left behind only questions. Was Claire Donovan merely a maid who crossed a forbidden line and paid the price? Or was she a determined whistleblower silenced by forces too powerful to challenge? For some, she became a symbol of courage, a reminder of what happens when ordinary people stand against wealth and secrecy. For others, she remained a cautionary tale, a woman who risked everything and lost. And as the lights dim on this story, one question remains. one that echoes beyond the gates of Jacob Sterling's estate and into the minds of everyone who has heard this tale. Would you have trusted her? What do you think really happened that night? Was Claire Donovan nothing more than a maid who made a mistake, or was she something far more? Someone who carried secrets too dangerous to reveal? We want to hear your thoughts. Before we end, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.